With the lower gallery, I feel like the window sort of sets a specific tone for the other works. So it's playing with this idea of the downstairs becoming quite a hermetic, closed-in space. And then the first thing the viewer would encounter, I imagine, would be the puffer jacket works, which up until recently I've been making as objects that go directly onto the wall. And so I wanted to make them freestanding so that the viewer could really move around them and encounter them a bit like sculpture in the round. And they also allow your eye to stray and to sort of start seeing what's around you. So you could see the rest of the space within the work. The eggs that I've used are kind of cast in jesmonite, and they're there to sort of imply some ideas around touch and the hand present in what is otherwise quite structural, hard-edged architectural pieces. One of the works on the concourse is an object called a watch queen. I guess the title comes from me trying to ascribe something figurative to this abstract object, and I wanted it to sit alongside the viewer and sort of survey the show. So it kind of becomes like a protagonist looking over the concourse at all the objects below it. Looking for one is the tiled lounger in the lower galleries, and I feel like that's quite different from the other tiled works in the show. It's more pointedly a kind of piece of furniture in a way. I decided to use it as a surface for a still life. So there's an object on it which looks as though it's a laptop, but it's actually just a polished piece of steel with a fold in it. And accompanying the laptop work is also an ashtray with lots of cast popcorn popping out of it. And I guess I'd been thinking a lot about viewing and consumption, and in particular the consumption of image. And I like this idea of maybe using popcorn as something that sort of spoke about that in a really casual way. I guess with my use of tiles, I feel like there's always these ideas that kind of manifest about hygiene and things being cleaned. And I wanted to use a multi-surface cleaner to sort of sit there, but I wanted to sort of render it as something that wasn't functionable. And so I did that by casting it in a block of resin. The neons in the corridor, I kind of nicknamed breathing neons. They kind of light up and then dim again, as though they might be alive or personified somehow. I like the idea of thinking of the paintings as being about a sort of point of contact between a substance and a surface. And I produced them using a two-part resin, which I don't have a very long working time with. So I paint each droplet by hand, and they're compositions that arrive kind of very slowly over time, but for that reason they are very kind of highly orchestrated compositions, I guess. So whereas downstairs I wanted to play with this idea of denying the viewer a view outside of the gallery, I feel like upstairs that's kind of heightened as you walk through a dark space initially, which I always wanted to be a condition for a certain type of work, and that happens to be these posters that are lit by torches. So as you kind of make your way through that space, you enter the starkness of the two galleries to your right and the left. And I think that's when there's an opportunity for the viewer to sort of see outside of the space. So with the work Your Disco Needs You, the printed ceramic tile, we're kind of bringing that back in through this image that looks like a reflection of the park outside. As you enter into the gallery on your right, you're confronted quite quickly with another tiled object. It's kind of referencing the architecture of two cubicles maybe, or two doorways that are very close together. And the internal section of the structure has glossy tiles, so that as you pass through the archways, you get a reflection of yourself, which then dissipates back into the room. As you walk through that work, you're confronted with some floor tiles titled Tuesday. This was an opportunity to sort of play with introducing some mark underneath the surface. So what I've done is used painted wood with talcum powder. So I quite like thinking about the mark making in the tiles a little bit like dirt trapped under a fingernail. It's not something that's kind of on the surface, it's something that's sat underneath there, and for that reason it's not something that can easily be wiped away.